Back to Zoom. All right, ready to roll. Happy holidays. Let's go ahead and get this thing started.
John Boyle.
Happy holidays to you as well. Shane,
Appreciate
you guys had to play without Tyler last week. You get him back today. Just what's missing from the offense when he's not on the field?
Yeah, I think guys tried to step up. We tried to fill the void, but a couple of those plays that he's made for us off schedule didn't quite get to those in this past week. And looking forward to getting him back out here. He was running around out there. I know he'd took him a little while to get over COVID, and it's a real thing. It's a real thing out there, and so his safety and his health was at first priority. But it was great to get him back out here. He was running around and says he feels great again. So that was a good addition to back out of practice.
Jackie.
Hey Shane, I know stats don't tell the whole story, but when you look at the sack numbers for Robert Quinn, what are they doing differently with him from his first to second year in Chicago? How is he being so effective this year?
Yeah, I think really, they do a nice job all around. When Hicks has been playing, or the different guys with their push inside, because Quinn has always done such an elite job of running around the edge and working those outside pass rush lanes, and then all of a sudden he hits you with the up and under. So he just does a great job of relentlessly pursuing the quarterback. And sometimes, like in the years past, he might not get the sack numbers, but man, it always feels like he's around the ball. It always feels like that big right hand's coming over the top and swiping at the ball. So I just think, some years, the sack numbers are higher just because guys actually get and finish through with the sack versus other years where he may have just been coming up short. But, he got a chance to be around him in LA a few years back, and just seeing how he practices every day, how he rushes the passer every single day. He's that guy you got to keep an eye on and know where he's at, and the production certainly is there this year.
Thank you.
Michael Sean.
Hey Shane, through 14 weeks, how much of the offense has looked like how you envisioned it would look when you first got hired?
Well, I think there's been bits and pieces so far in my mind. We just haven't had that consistency throughout 4 quarters of a game. Houston was as close as we've been, and still looking there, still looking to keep improving, and still have high expectations of what it'll look like this week, and knowing that we're trying to learn from the past, had to overcome some different obstacles throughout the season this year, but still having that positive mindset that, hey, this next game is where we're going to keep going and keep looking to click and keep moving in that forward-thinking mindset.
How much of that is just not perhaps marrying the run game and the pass game the way you thought you would, maybe in training camp?
Yeah, I think for us, is in terms of looking at some of our runs and our play actions, we've had some success in those areas in certain chunks. It just hasn't always played out throughout the whole course of the game. Didn't play out the way we'd like it this past game in terms of getting that complete run game going where the play actions were popping open. But for us, really, as a whole, it's still come down to executing at a higher level on third down, taking all 11 like we've talked about, and avoiding some of the bad plays or the negative plays that have come as a result of some of those third down miscues.
Thanks.
Jen?
With that run game, DJ Dallas had a couple of nice runs in there. Was he running with a different style on Tuesday, or it was just a function of how the offense was working when he was in there?
Yeah, I think, we got into a nice rhythm, especially on that first drive coming out of the second half when DJ was in there getting a heavy amount of that work right there. But DJ's done an excellent job every time he's had an opportunity that's been presented to him. I think back to the Arizona drive where he's in there in the 2-minute drive that ended in a touchdown for him. But the guys up front did a great job. They were playing physical, blocking physical. Unfortunately, we had some of those negative plays that happened during the game. But as far as DJ as a whole, I have high expectations for him because he's just done so many good things and done it the right way every time he's had opportunities in practice. So it's no surprise when he does get his opportunities in the game that he does run, and he always, those kick returns, the physical style that you see him starting to develop really showed up this past week.
Tim?
Jen stole my question, so I'll ask about another guy who's getting an early opportunity. Jake Curhan, what have you seen from him these past few weeks when he's gotten his opportunity, and maybe what stood out about him back in training camp that you guys decided to give an undrafted guy an opportunity on the roster?
Yeah, I think, first of all, back in training camp when he comes in as a rookie, a lot of the younger guys, especially the undrafted guys, are are kind of lumped into the back of the line, so to speak, and they're getting their reps with the threes and then getting a chance with the twos. And the thing that stood out right away with Jake was he had a high football IQ, and he had a really good ability to get himself out of bad situations, for a bigger guy. And see that a lot with the great offensive linemen as they're developing when they're younger. Okay, can they get themselves out of bad situations? If they take a set that's a little bit off, can they keep their hands on the defender, stay off the ground, and then work to redirect and save the block. And Jake showed a lot of that right away. And then as his toughness is was there on tape, his toughness has really been on display as far as his work ethic and the way he practices day in and day out. And I think as a result of all those things, it's shown in the games where, like I mentioned a week or two back, where he's kind of out of that rookie mode for the season. We've accumulated enough games, enough practice reps where the guys around him feel like, hey, B-Shell's down, he can't go, and Jake's been able to step right in and do a really nice job, and then going against some pretty elite pass rushers along the way and doing a great job of holding his own.
Greg?
And Shane, how, if any way, have you seen Russell Wilson affected when he first got back from his layoff and/or his finger, and how it's gotten better since?
Yeah, I think he's really started to get into a better rhythm, especially after those first couple games. Before this past game was really starting to get into a flow. And I think, when it comes down to this past game, he's did a great job with the quick game. We had some good execution on those, and then we just missed some of the downfield throws, and different reasons, different things getting off the spot, or just the result of not connecting on some of those. But I think Russ has done a good job, like he's always done, of doing everything in his power to get back to playing and competing at the highest level. I feel bad for him as far as having to go through that injury, having to go through that process. But I know in the long run it's something that'll make him stronger, and he's done a great job of again keeping that positive mindset, keeping that work ethic going, and good things are going to come sooner rather than later for him because of all this hard work that he's put in, and the results. Hey, they haven't been there to what we want them to be right now, and he's the one that's pushing the hardest to get us to where we need to be.
When in Green Bay in the Arizona game, when it was obvious that he'd come back before he was fully healthy, how much, if any, did you have to change how you called games, or even in the course of the game?
I think not so much different within the course of the game, but knowing leading up to the game, just being smart, and I think so much of it was about letting him get back into a rhythm and getting back into it after not being out on the practice field, being able to actually execute the plays for an extended period of time, and so it was just a feel as the game went, and again, it didn't work out early on, but I think he's done a great job of keeping working and keeping developing and keeping progressing and keeping everything in front of him right now.
Michael Sean?
Hey, Shane, what kind of value has Will brought as a blocker, and what kind of blow is that to your whole offense if he can't play on Sunday?
Yeah, I think Will has just done an excellent job, just really in all three phases as far as the run game, the pass protection game, and then as a receiver when his number's been called upon. He's one of the leaders on our offense as far as his daily demeanor, the way he can communicate with all the guys, his toughness, his mindset day in and day out has been something that guys that, with Colby and Gerald and Tyler and Ryan, if Will's not able to go on Sunday, all those tight ends that have to pick their game up just a little bit more to help replace a pretty big part of our team, a pretty big part of our offense as a guy that does a lot of the dirty work and does it at a very high level.
Thanks.
Bob? Bob? Okay, I guess that's it. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Thank you.